She was just a cleaner. But that night, she saw Clara's best friend kiss the boss and walk away with a stolen file no one else was meant to touch. 10 years of loyalty, gone in one day. But what no one expected was that someone else had started watching. And Grace, she was done staying quiet. Because the woman they ignored had seen everything. That evening, the estate was quiet except for the distant clink of silverware. Grace moved like routine, gliding through the halls with her cloth, her bucket, her silence. Until a door opened upstairs. Kevin's private study. Anna emerged first. Her silk blouse clung slightly off one shoulder. Her lipstick blurred at the corners. In her manicured hand, she carried a crimson folder, thick, heavy, unmistakable. Grace had dusted the locked cabinet that folder belonged to for years. It was never meant to be outside. Anna laughed, soft and smug, then leaned in, pressing a kiss to Kevin's cheek like it belonged there. Kevin stepped forward, catching sight of Grace at the far end of the hall. Their eyes met. He didn't blink. He didn't move. And then he shut the door. No words, no excuses, just silence. Grace stood frozen for a breath. Her cloth hung limp in her hand. Then, quietly, she turned and descended the stairs, not hurried, not hiding, just bracing. By dawn, the decision was made. Over breakfast, her hands folded on her lap, she told Clara what she saw, every detail. The kiss, the folder. It turned. Anna. Kevin sat across from them, his gaze fixed on his cup. He didn't interrupt, didn't protest. When Clara turned to him and asked, should we let her stay, he rose without a word and left the room. An hour later, there was a knock at her door. The estate manager held a plain white envelope. He didn't look her in the eye. Leave of absence, it read. Unpaid. Effective immediately. And just like that, the betrayal wasn't just personal. It was official. It had begun. Stay with us. This betrayal cuts deep, but the revenge cuts deeper. Grace didn't pack. She stayed. The morning after her suspension, Clara called her into the front study. No tea, no small talk. Just the creak of the door closing behind her. I gave you shelter, food, a place to call home, Clara said. And you repay that by accusing my best friend of theft. Grace stood still. I saw her walk out of Kevin's office with your red folder. Clara's voice didn't rise. That made it worse. You've been here a decade, Grace. Do you think I don't know who's loyal to me? Grace's fingers curled into her palm. You do know. That's why I'm standing here. Clara turned away. You've embarrassed me. Hurry, turn Harry, your matter. My husband. She didn't say more. She didn't need to. The message was clear. You are not one of us. Later that day, Clara passed the order down. Grace is not to clean upstairs. Keep her on ground level only. It wasn't a firing. It was something worse in exile. And Kevin, he never spoke. He walked past Grace in the hallway that afternoon and didn't even look her way. By sundown, the gardener stopped greeting her. The cook left dishes for her to clear, but didn't say thank you. One of the maids whispered to another, she thinks this place belongs to her. Grace heard every word, but she kept wiping the railing, kept straightening the cushions, kept showing up, until someone made sure she couldn't anymore. That evening, the front lounge glowed with soft lamplight and tension thick enough to cut. Anna sat on the velvet couch, tears streaking down her perfectly painted face. Clara stood over her, arms crossed, lips pressed into a tight line. I don't understand, Anna whispered, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. I treated her like family. I brought her gifts on holidays. Why would she say something like that? She buried her face in her hands. Clara didn't move. Kevin stood near the fireplace, his arms folded, staring into the floor like it held answers he didn't want to face. Grace stood in the hallway, watching, silent. Anna looked up suddenly. Maybe she's jealous, she said, voice trembling. Of what Clara asked. Kevin, Anna said softly. You know how these things are. When someone feels invisible too long, her voice trailed off. Clara didn't reply. Kevin shifted uncomfortably but didn't speak. That silence was permission. enough to feed the whispers that started swirling around the estate. By morning, someone had drawn a tiny X with chalk near Grace's supply closet. A mark. A warning. The young butler refused to meet her eyes. The laundry assistant handed her a towel with fingertips like tongs, and the whispers continued, more vivid, more cruel. She's obsessed with the boss. She wants to be the new Mrs. She probably made it all up. Grace said nothing. She simply returned the towel, cleaned the corners no one saw, and carried her bucket down the hall. But the quiet was no longer peace. It was pressure, pressing harder every hour. And the woman who started it all still walked the halls, perfume trailing behind lies. By midweek, Anna changed tactics. No more tears, just smiles that cut. That afternoon, as the staff set up for a small garden dinner, she accidentally spilled a glass of red wine across the white linens Grace had just laid out. "Oops," she said sweetly, then turned to the guests. "Don't worry, she's got it. She's very efficient." Laughter followed. Not loud, but enough. Grace bent down, wiping the deep red stain without a word. Anna leaned over. "Maybe use something stronger. You know, like truth." No one else heard it. But Grace did. That night, after most of the house had gone quiet, Anna slipped into the staff corridor. She moved fast, heels in hand, one eye on the cameras. Her hand slid a small black USB stick into the side pouch of Grace's cleaning caddy, nestled between a bottle of polish and folded cloths. By morning, the head of security was waiting at the service entrance. "Routine inspection," he said, eyes flat. Grace watched as he searched her cart. His hand froze on the pouch. "What's this?" Grace stared. "I don't know." He held up the USB with two fingers. "Encrypted. Company marked Turtwanen to Mayshurn. Highly confidential." Clara wasn't present. Kevin wasn't either. But the staff manager handed her a sealed envelope. "Effective immediately," it read. "Grace T. is suspended without access to upper floors pending further review. No eye contact. No explanation. Just cold paper and clipped orders." And Anna she passed by 15 minutes later, humming. Same blouse as before. Same shade of lipstick. She looked at Grace, smiled, and said, "Some stains. Don't wash out." The restrictions came fast. She's not allowed on the second floor. Avoid assigning her to guest areas. No direct interaction with the Donovans unless requested. It was all spoken in soft voices, like gossip wrapped in velvet. But it hit harder than any scream. Grace heard it all. The tone, the space around her widening, the glances exchanged over her head. Her mop was moved from its usual corner. Her access card downgraded. Even the laundry rota now skipped her name. She had been erased while still standing there. One morning, the young groundskeeper looked at her as if he couldn't remember how long she'd been part of the house. "You used to live upstairs, right?" he asked. She nodded. He blinked, shrugged, and walked off. That evening, as clouds gathered low and heavy, Grace was assigned to sweep the back terrace. No one else volunteered. No one asked if she needed a jacket. Rain began to fall first light, then steady. She kept sweeping. The tiled steps gleamed under her effort. Her hands were stiff from cold. Her shirt clung to her skin. Behind the curtain, someone peeked through the parlor window. They didn't open the door, didn't say a word, but they watched her work through the rain. That night, in the dark corner of the laundry room, Grace changed into dry clothes without a word. Her fingers trembled. "Hurry west, hurry in." Her eyes didn't. The next morning, she showed up at 6:45 like always, as if nothing had broken. But something had. And the one thing no one expected was that Grace had started listening, not just watching. 3 days into Grace's suspension, Clara sat alone in her home office, fingers tapping lightly on a printed bank statement. A transaction, high five figures, had been routed to a holding account in the name of a woman Clara hadn't spoken to in years. An old schoolmate, once bankrupt, now suddenly receiving a deposit tagged with her company's internal code. Clara said nothing. She didn't mention it to Kevin. She didn't confront Anna. Instead, that afternoon, while the estate was quiet, she walked to the West Corridor utility closet, opened Grace's cleaning cart. From her coat pocket, she retrieved a small gray surveillance cube, silent, wireless, and motion triggered. She slid it behind the second shelf, between bleach bottles and rags. A soft green blink confirmed it was live. That night, Grace was called in again on a limited work order. No one said a word to her. She moved like a ghost, washing outdoor banisters, wiping garden benches, sweeping paths no one used after sunset. At 9:34 p.m., she entered the lower guest bathroom to clean. As she bent to wipe beneath the sink, her hand brushed against something soft and damp. A crumpled receipt. She was about to toss it, then paused. It wasn't from a grocery or hardware store. The heading read Trinity Holdings, and beneath it 1X encrypted USB drive, no refund, cash payment. The receipt was dated 2 days before she was accused. The signature line was blank, but the item code matched the tag printed on the USB they claimed was found in her cart. She stared at it. Her mind turned. Was it Anna Kevin someone else? She didn't know, but she folded it gently and slipped it into her apron. The next morning, Clara asked to see her again. Grace stood at the study door. This time, Clara didn't even look up from her desk. "Did you take anything from my office?" Clara asked. "No. Marimada one. Any folder. Ever." Grace's hands were at her sides. Clara finally looked at her. "If you're lying, this is the last time you step inside this house." "I'm not lying." Silence. Then Clara turned to her monitor. On it, a grainy pause frame, someone moving near Grace's cart. Grace didn't see it. She stepped back, unsure if she was being watched or tested. Outside, Kevin passed by the window, murmuring into his phone. Inside, the small green light blinked again. Silent. Unnoticed. She thought she was finally being seen, but someone else was watching and waiting for her to fail. Long before she wore gloves and carried polish, Grace knew what it meant to be invisible. She was 8 the first time her mother forgot to pick her up from school. By midnight, she was curled up on the cold tiles of a bus stop restroom, clutching a torn children's book she'd fished out of the trash earlier that day. The smell of bleach stung her nose. Her stomach grumbled. Her mother's last words that morning rang in her ears. "Stop dreaming. You think scrubbing toilets will make you rich." But Grace kept reading, mouth moving silently, finger underlining every word. That same week, she was banned from the local library for lingering too long and not washing. A week later, she saw them. 3 girls in matching blazers, laughing as they crossed the park in the late sun. One of them had hair pulled into a sleek braid and carried a clipboard, Clara Donovan. The other 2 trailed behind her, one with oversized sunglasses, Anna. They were 15 or 16. Grace couldn't tell. Clara's family owned the new hotel that replaced the old train station. Her mother was known for donating buildings. Her father, former ambassador. Clara was already handling event spreadsheets by 14. Everyone said she'd run empires. And Kevin, the quiet boy who followed her around with a chessboard and wild ideas. He wasn't rich, not then. His dad worked at the tax office. His mom ran a tutoring agency. But he made Clara laugh. And eventually, that was enough. That day in the park, Clara saw Grace. A small girl in a torn shirt, sitting under a swing set, reading alone. Shried Aratium. She stopped, pulled a folded $10 bill from her blazer, walked over. "Keep it." "Read well," she said, and walked away. Anna looked back and muttered, "She smells like the floor of a bus." They didn't see Grace again for years. But Grace remembered. Years passed. Grace never saw Clara again, not in person. But her name lived in every article Grace managed to find left on benches, clipped in half at barber shops, half read in waiting rooms. Clara Donovan, the heiress who built a fintech empire before 30. The power couple of East Coast real estate, Clara and Kevin Donovan. They became symbols of wealth Grace couldn't touch. But she never forgot that $10 bill. Or the look in Clara's eyes, not pity, but command. It was the only time someone looked at her and saw potential. Grace studied hard, took cleaning jobs after school, slept in shelters, passed her GED at 20. When she heard Donovan Estates was hiring live-in staff, she circled the ad 3 times. She applied, waited, interviewed, and when Clara walked in that day with the same braid, same eyes, Grace didn't speak a word about their first meeting. Clara didn't recognize her. Or maybe she did and chose not to say. Anna had changed to new face, same smirk. She visited often, trailing perfume and sharp heels. She called Grace the reliable one, always with a smile that never reached her eyes. Grace stayed silent through it all. She worked, saved, kept to her room. She never forgot the weight of that $10 bill, folded neatly in her sock drawer for 12 years before she finally spent it on bus fare to her interview. Now, standing at the edge of betrayal, framed, humiliated, stripped of every layer of trust, she felt that weight again, but different. Not as hope, as memory, as proof that someone once saw her worth. She looked in the mirror. Her eyes didn't water. Her jaw didn't shake. This time, she wouldn't walk away. The next morning, the estate woke early, but not to the scent of coffee or the clink of breakfast trays. The front gate opened at 7:03. Iman me what Surya had made. Sharp. Clara returned from her 3-day trip earlier than expected, earlier than anyone was prepared for. Grace was already in uniform, mopping the lower hallway outside the study. She didn't look up, her back straight, movements clean. The cloth in her hand didn't tremble. Inside the surveillance room, it tapped his keyboard, eyes flicking between feeds. The device Clara had planted was still active. Last night's footage had synced. No tampering, no deletion. Anna was not on the schedule, but Kevin was. He entered the house from the side door, tie loose, eyes shadowed. He didn't speak to Grace, didn't speak to anyone. Clara passed Grace in the hallway without a word. No eye contact, just a pause half a second before continuing up the stairs. The air was tight, like the house itself was bracing. Then at 7:42, it concerned Petinina. IT confirmed the footage had been downloaded, stabilized, and clipped. He pressed send. In the West Wing, a printer came to life. Clara's assistant retrieved a manila folder, thick with annotated screenshots. The storm hadn't broken yet, but the sky above the estate dimmed. In the corridor, Grace wrung her cloth dry, staring at the front door. Waiting. Something had shifted. No one said a word, but everyone felt it. This house, for the first time in years, was no longer watching her. It was watching itself. At exactly 10 in the morning, the conference room doors closed behind the last person. The air inside was still, cold with precision. At the head of the long-polished table, Clara sat composed, spine straight, eyes unreadable. Her suit was black, her hair tied low. In front of her, a leather folder rested untouched. To her right, Kevin adjusted his cufflinks for the third time. The skin beneath his eyes was dark, his jaw tight. He hadn't spoken since they entered the room. 2 lawyers sat across from them, one from the Donovan corporate office, the other from the bank's legal division. Neither looked particularly comfortable. A tablet had been placed beside Clara earlier that morning. It remained face down. No one asked why. I believe all preliminary documentation is ready, the bank lawyer began, his tone cautious, pending final approval of internal security concerns. Kevin cleared his throat. That's standard procedure. We had a flag. It's being resolved. Clara said nothing. Then, not without lifting her eyes, she said simply, I want Grace's name cleared from the security system. Today, the words landed heavy. The Donovan counsel blinked. Grace T., the staff member under review. Clara nodded once. Isini. There was confusion. I no longer accept that version of events. Kevin shifted. You're reinstating her. Clara turned to look at him, not with anger, but with something far more unsettling calm recognition. Is that a problem? He didn't answer. At that moment, the assistant returned with a nod to IT, who stepped forward silently and placed the unlocked tablet in front of Clara. The home screen displayed a pause frame, grainy, monochrome but unmistakable. Clara didn't touch it. Instead, she reached into her folder and pulled out a single page, sliding it across the table. At the top, bold print read, Incident Report 47, Internal Breach Pending Review. Her voice was steady. Play the footage. Kanaka Kinanuern, Shordi Washington. No one moved. Then the screen lit up, and the silence began to roar. The video began to play without sound, but the tension in the room filled the silence. Grainy footage revealed the hallway outside Kevin's office. At first, only movement, the turn of a handle, the slow swing of a door. Then Anna appeared, stepping into frame in heels too sharp for comfort and a blouse slightly unbuttoned at the collar. She glanced both ways before slipping into the room. The next feed showed her inside the study, alone. She moved with ease, without hesitation, like someone who had done this before. She went straight to the drawer Clara always kept locked. This time, it wasn't. Anna opened it, reached in, pulled out the crimson folder, its cover thick, familiar, marked with Clara's private emblem. She didn't linger. She tucked it into her tote bag, zipped it halfway, and glanced toward the doorway. Then Kevin entered. He didn't flinch. He didn't ask what she was doing. Anna walked up to him, whispered something inaudible, then leaned forward and kissed him. Not hurried, not hidden. And Kevin, frozen, said nothing. His hands didn't move. His eyes didn't close. He just let it happen. A third camera angle picked up the next part hallway footage from the West Wing utility closet. Anna crouched beside the cleaning cart. She reached into her bag, pulled out a small USB stick, looked around, and slipped it under a rag inside the cart's side pouch. Her face was calm, practiced, deliberate. She stood, smiled faintly, and walked away. The video ended. No one moved. Clara turned to Kevin. Her voice was quiet, but her words cut with surgical precision. She walked into your office, took my folder, kissed you, and then used my housekeeper as a scapegoat. And you stood there. Kevin's jaw twitched. I thought she was just being affectionate. I didn't know she was taking anything. I didn't know about the USB. You knew she was in my space. With my files. You watched her lie to my face. Kevin looked down. It got out of hand. Clara didn't blink. You weren't just careless, Kevin. You were complicit. And now I'm cleaning up your silence. Then she turned to the lawyers. As of this moment, I am assuming full authority over all Donovan assets. Clause 14A grants me sole power in breach scenarios. Clause 15C applies to familial conflicts of interest. Begin transfer procedures now. The bank lawyer opened his mouth, but thought better of it. Kevin tried again. Clara, this doesn't have to go that far. But she didn't even look at him. Instead, she addressed to T. That was the second time he said nothing. Then her eyes returned to Kevin. There won't be a third. Just as the final signature hovered above the page, Clara raised her hand not with urgency, but with precision. We're not done, she said. All eyes shifted. She didn't explain. With a slight nod, she signaled to IT. He stepped forward, his fingers steady as he tapped a button on his tablet. The screen flickered once. Then came a new feed this time, not from a hallway or office, but from within a cleaning cart. The footage was silent, monochrome, and chilling. Anna appeared, crouched beside the cart in the quiet corridor outside Kevin's office. She moved fast, but not carelessly, checking both directions before reaching into her designer tote. From inside, she retrieved a slim USB stick. With the ease of routine, she lifted a rag, slid the drive beneath it, and tucked the cloth back into place. Then she stood, smoothed her skirt, and walked away. The video ended in silence. For a moment, the room didn't move. Then came the reaction, a gasp from one lawyer, a stunned blink from the internal counsel. Kevin shifted in his seat, jaw clenched. Clara's voice returned, calm and surgical. The evidence that supposedly implicated Grace, that was planted. By the same woman who took my folder, and the same man who stood silent while it happened. Her gaze never wavered from Kevin. Before anyone could respond, the internal counsel cleared his throat and reached for a document. There's one complication, he said, eyes flicking across the lines. A digital access request to retrieve Clara's private folder was sent under the name Grace Thomas. It matched her ID, clearance level, and internal tags. IT leaned in. We traced it. The request came from a new device, but the credentials were cloned. It's a fake, but built with enough accuracy to bypass flags. Clara's eyes narrowed. So someone not only planted the USB, They stole her identity. Correct, the lawyer confirmed. The optics are damaging. Until this clears, protocol demands suspension. Kevin finally spoke. She could have slipped, left something open, not realized. That was it. Clara closed the folder in front of her, not with anger. She would have whack with resolve. Then she turned, walked to the window and said nothing. But across the table, justice had already begun to shift. The next morning, Grace arrived at the side gate as usual. She wore her gray uniform. Her cleaning cart rolled behind her, wheels clicking softly against the cobblestone. But the gate didn't open. Instead, a security guard approached, holding a sealed envelope. "Miss Thomas," he said, voice tight, "you've been placed under formal investigation. You're not permitted on the property until further notice." Grace didn't speak. She took the envelope with both hands. Behind the glass of the foyer, two other maids stood watching. Neither waved. One whispered something. The other turned away. She didn't argue. She didn't plead. She simply turned around. As she walked past the garden path she had trimmed for years, a gust of wind blew rain across her face. She passed the veranda where she once served summer tea, the rose arbor she'd rebuilt after the last storm. No one came to stop her. No one said her name. She stepped through the main gate for the first time, not as a worker, but as an accused. Inside the estate, Clara stood behind the upper floor window, the same spot where Grace had once seen betrayal unfold. Her hands were folded, her face unreadable. She didn't speak. She didn't wave. She just watched Grace disappear into the rain. They erased her with silence. But the silence had seen too much, and it was about to speak back. It started with a phone call. 3 days after Grace had been dismissed, the Donovan IT team finalized their trace route report. The suspicious account that had been used to send the data request. It was created from an iPad logged into the guest network inside Anna's private suite. Clara didn't call for a meeting. She didn't issue a memo. She summoned the staff, every single one. In the grand foyer, maids stood shoulder to shoulder with chefs, drivers, and gardeners. Kevin wasn't present. He hadn't been seen since the morning Grace left. Anna arrived last, heels clicking, eyes bright. "Is something wrong, darling?" she asked Clara with a half laugh. "You could have just texted me." Clara didn't respond. She simply nodded to security. Two officers in plain suits stepped forward. Anna Monroe, one said, "You're under investigation for corporate fraud, evidence tampering, and unauthorized access to private data systems. Please come with us." Anna's smile faltered. She looked at Clara. "This is a joke." "Right." But Clara didn't smile. Grace didn't put that USB in her cart. "You did." "You can't prove," Anna began. "We can," said the IT manager, stepping forward, holding a printout. Same iPad. Same login ID. Same timestamp. Matched MAC address. The foyer was silent. One maid gasped softly. Another covered her mouth. Anna's eyes darted. "Kevin knew. Ask him. He said it was fine." "Kevin doesn't speak for this house anymore," Clara said. Anna's heels stumbled. The officers took her arms. The staff parted as they led her through. A phone in the corner went live. Someone had started filming. "Clicky, wasn't on." The camera flashed. That same afternoon, Clara entered Kevin's former study, now empty of his belongings. On the desk was a sealed envelope. She didn't hesitate. She opened it. Inside was a letter drafted by Donovan Legal. The top line, "Voluntary resignation, executive title." She didn't need to read further. Downstairs in the sunlit garden where Grace once trimmed roses, a new gathering formed. Staff members stood in 2 lines, facing the main entrance. Then the gates opened. Grace walked in, her posture steady, eyes ahead. She no longer wore her uniform. Instead, a clean navy blazer and flat shoes. For the first time in 10 years, she entered not from the service path, but through the front. The same maid who once mocked her stepped forward. Her voice trembled. "Grace, I didn't know. I judged you?" Grace didn't speak, but she nodded once. Then Clara came out. She held a small document in hand, a new ID badge, gleaming in plastic. It read Grace Thomas, Executive Assistant, Donovan Estate. She clipped it to Grace's lapel herself. Behind them, one of the drivers whispered to another, from cleaning floors to being the right hand of the boss. The sun shifted overhead. And in the background, someone hit record. That evening, a quiet shift settled over the Donovan estate. Where once whispers followed Grace like shadows, now footsteps paused when she passed. A new plaque gleamed on the hallway wall, mounted just below the family portrait. It bore her name not as a servant, but as a symbol in honor of integrity, Grace Thomas, who stood silent until truth had a voice. Beyond the plaque, a freshly installed office door reflected the low hallway light. On its frosted glass, a name printed cleanly, Grace, Executive Assistant. Inside, the space was small but deliberate, a new desk facing the west garden, a leather-bound planner, and a silver nameplate that still smelled of fresh polish. On the center of the desk, an envelope, thicker than most, hand-addressed. She opened it carefully. Inside was a scholarship letter from the Donovan Foundation, full tuition for any management program of her choice, domestic or abroad. A note at the bottom read, mentorship included, travel covered, recommendation guaranteed. It was signed in blue ink, Clara Donovan, status honorary guardian. As she sat quietly, the door clicked. Clara stepped in, her voice calm. Your mother would have been proud. Grace held the envelope gently. She never believed a cleaner's daughter would ever step past the service gate. Clara looked her in the eye. She was wrong. You didn't just step in, you rewrote the rules. A soft knock followed. One of the housemaids, her posture uncertain, her hands wrapped around a small tray. I made tea, she said. And if it's okay, I'd like to learn from you. Grace stood, nodded once, and reached for a second cup. Stay until the end. The twist redefined what redemption truly means. Grace lost everything, her home, her name, even her silence, only to rise stronger. Not in anger, but in truth. She didn't shout. She didn't fight dirty. She waited. And when the moment came, her loyalty stood taller than any lie. But what would you have done if you were framed, humiliated, cast out in the rain? Would you walk away or wait for justice to knock? Would you risk your life to protect someone who doubted you? Would you trade a mop for a seat at the table? Because Grace did. She didn't just survive injustice. She changed her nameplate. She changed her place. She changed her power one. That's what real life change looks like. Comment below. What moment hit you hardest? Would you forgive Kevin? Would you trust Clara? Or would you be Grace? Subscribe to Unveiled Wealth, where kindness sparks redemption and silence breaks power.